Kia ora everyone, and welcome to the Community Development Committee meeting. Welcome to councillors, our staff and members of the public joining us. Start the meeting. Is there anyone that would like to do karakia to start? Can be in Te Reo Pākehā in English. TC? It's an open invite, so whoever would like to.
Hei mo tātou, I tō mātou I te rangi, whakapangi a mātou I tō mātou kōrero, I tō mātou hui, arahina mai I a mātou hui, I te huarahi tuku. Ki te no te mātou te tama, wairo tātou. Amen.
Good, Paul. Thank you very much. Apologies for this meeting. We have received an apology from Francois for the duration of the meeting. He's en route to attend a tangi, and Councillor Neil apologises she's going to join the meeting at 6 o'clock. Are there any further apologies? If there are none, is someone prepared to move that we accept and receive those apologies?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Crothers, seconded Councillor Cogan. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The resolution is carried. Thank you very much. The second item is the declarations of interest. We do have an electronic interest register accessible on Microsoft Teams as well as a hard copy here. If you have any amendments, can those please be noted on here on the paper copy and communicated to Megan at the front? Just pass that around. Thank you. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda from staff, from elected members, from the committee members? There being none, we'll move through to the fourth agenda item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, and these have been made available to you all through Microsoft Teams, circulated electronically. Are there any amendments to those minutes as circulated? No amendments? Is someone prepared to move that they are a true and accurate record of the meeting?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Cogan and Councillor Davidson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. The fifth item is the action list. It's on pages 4 through 5 of your agenda, and I welcome the Chief Executive to speak to this forum. Kia ora, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through item by item. First item, Reserves Parks Environment Subcommittee to be formalised. This has been completed. The second item is to develop the terms of reference for the Reserves Parks Environment Subcommittee. This has also been completed. Invite Westtrek to a future committee meeting due to the unavailability. This has been deferred until the 5th of October meeting. And so the CEO of Westtrek will attend there. Westland Safer Community Coalition, Safer Westland, letter to advise the group of the formation of the subcommittee, and that's an official reporting line through to this committee. That's been completed. Hokitika Museum Governance Group to be established. So we are awaiting the outcome of further consultation, obviously with the changes to the LTP amendment. So that process will occur following Council's adoption on the 18th of August for public consultation. So that process won't commence until we've got that whole process finalised. Culture and Heritage Subcommittee, once again that's in the same boat. There is work we can do in the space prior to this action being completed. It's working with relevant parties to actually identify what the future terms of reference of that committee is all about and what the group will be made up of. So we'll get that work underway shortly. Review Woodstock Looker. I apologise, Paul, for the last action statement. It's actually, you are correct. This is actually council infrastructure. This commitment was made by previous operations manager Rob Daniel some time ago. West Roads have the contract for maintaining the grounds, and those assets should be on our system, but they aren't, so they'll be added to our system, and we'll be looking to rectify those assets. They include the shelter and the interpretation panels. I understand that the interpretation panels have gone missing. Was in the press review this week, late last week. In terms of Hokitika Cemetery and signage at Friends Joseph, so in terms of the cemetery, so we've completed a full audit, and there were some shortcomings, but nothing significant. And we've taken up those shortcomings with West Roads. The signage at Friends Joseph, this was to do with the planning issue, and that is obviously still in progress as well. Western Creative Community Group. This is to email current members and thank the advertised nominations from the Guardian. So that has been completed. And the Hokitika CBD Revitalisation Working Group. So this is, a lot of this function was to do with the township development and aligning it with the One District Plan Master Plan. This actually sits in the regulatory and planning role, with Fiona Skidden taking the lead on this. We have had discussions in the executive team regarding the township development and master plan. We actually believe that this plan should actually sit in the Planning and Regs Committee, not actually the, I suppose, the Parks and Environments Group. We're happy to talk to council about getting that amended if they agree with that concept. It's all to do with feeding into the One District Plan, and it's a Hokitika Master Plan for Township Centre. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. Are there any questions to the action list?
Through the Chair, the Hokitika Museum Governance Group. So a couple of questions on that. Firstly, is there any reason why we can't start that process now? I mean, I don't understand, you know, moving the museum back into under the umbrella of the council shouldn't interfere with that, I wouldn't have thought.
It may interfere with the makeup of the group. It really depends if, for example, if the consultation decided it didn't want to transfer it back to council control, the process would be led by Destination Westland as a governance group. It's they're responsible for the management of the museum at the moment. So it actually complicates it slightly, not dramatically, but I'd like to clean that up prior to setting this formation of this group.
Okay, because that leads to my second question, which is, does it need to be a governance group, or should it be a trust of some description, like like happens with trust boards run most museums and elsewhere in the country, and they don't own them, but they run. They have oversight of the
Can I
museum.
make a recommendation that report comes back to this group in terms of, or even to council in the near future in terms of what that model should look like? And there are a number of different ways to do it. There are trusts, there are friends of the museum, and all sorts of different models. So I suggest that we develop something for, not for this council meeting, a bit tight, but for September council meeting as a report.
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, because I think whichever structure is adopted, it ought to be at arm's length from the council. In my view, I think this is the vehicle that should be the interface between the museum and the council. I wouldn't like to see it come in directly under Destination Westland in terms of governance in the future structure.
It wouldn't be under Destination Westland if the museum, as per the LTP amendment, comes back to council, the council controlled activity. So we will be looking at how that governance group would be formed as part of this governance group.
Right, okay, because the trust board that draws membership from the community and from iwi, etc., in my view is the model, but I think that's pretty standard with museums, including some smaller museums. But it'd be interesting to see that. Thank you.
So we can take that as an action.
So just to clarify, what is the action?
So for the CE to provide a report back to council in terms of the future governance of museum for the September council meeting, governance structure.
Okay. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes. Through the chair, second issue, the Ring Woodstock lookout. So just to express appreciation for the work that was done by the Student Volunteer Army, which has tidied up the site immeasurably. It was definitely in need of a good haircut. However, I'm also concerned about the ongoing vandalism and the apparent removal of the interpretation panels up there. And the interpretation panels are what make that site. Yeah, I find it really disappointing. I mean, I researched and wrote and assembled those panels myself, and then have them ripped down. In the past, they've been burnt. I was really disappointed, but now they've targeted the little miners' shelter as well. Yes, I think there needs to be perhaps a longer-term view to that. We might be able to resurrect the panels electronically. I think I might still have an electronic copy, hopefully. But if not, basically we'll have to start again.
That's disappointing.
It is, and thank you very much for that, Paul. I think with the realisation that it's a council asset and the structures and interpretation panels are council owned, can we explore the concept of trying to find the digital files and get them replicated?
Yeah. I think we need to honour that, definitely.
Just
For the chair as well, is there a maintenance plan for the Ringu lookout, Paul?
The chair, there was the maintenance was signed over to the council in 2005, and the council undertook to do that maintenance, which Chief Executive says is through West Roads. It's, I think over the years it became pretty minimal. In fact, I think that's it. A little bit of grass that's there, and that was about it.
Is it? Yeah, so my question is there a plan for it? A maintenance plan? Do you know?
Is it with West Roads?
Is it?
They have a contract to maintain it.
Yes.
I'm not sure to what standard.
Okay. Right.
this sort of loosely relates to, but what primarily dominated the Reserves, Parks and Environment Subcommittee, and we got to generally with all of our reserves was this feeling of, you know, what do we need to do to change our current level of service to a desired level of service? And I think it was a common theme throughout a lot of reserves, this feeling of, you know, community, and now expecting a higher level of maintenance, a higher level of, you know, jobs like with interpretation panels and things being maintained, and if the damage being replaced, and that will come at a cost. So I think that's come through quite clearly from the subcommittee, that they would like that explored. And as part of the long-term plan, in terms of actually revisiting the whole parks and reserves maintenance contracts and rescoping that.
Yeah, that's part of the next 12 months. So that contract has been rolled over for another 12 months and it's due for renewal this July.
So between now and July, we, I guess, put forward the recommendation around the kind of expected levels of service we're looking in the long-term plan, which take into account things like reserve management plans and maintenance plans and the like.
Thank you.
Does that answer
Yep,
the question?
yep.
It's kind of mostly the Simon, but I can just touch on that subcommittee because we got down into quite a lot of detail around reserves and wanted to lift it back up. So we don't want to be meeting for meeting's sake, but really, if we want to change the levels of service we're currently getting, we have to plan for that and communicate that with the community and consult with the community because it will come at a cost.
Thank you.
Through the chair, does that include, when we talk about that, on the subject of the Hokitika Cemetery and signage and stuff like that, is because currently that's also under contract by West Roads. And you've got here that the lead officer on that is Lewis Sparks, but has the level of service around what was actually getting done with the cemeteries being reviewed as well?
Yes. So the standards were quite high in terms of when they did the audit, so there weren't any glaring omissions in terms of standard cemeteries. But it's around ensuring consistent auditing process around the cemeteries themselves.
So they were saying that they didn't think there was an issue with the maintenance at the cemetery.
No, we audited them and didn't find any major issues with them.
This is two different things because a current contract might say do X, but the public's perception might be they want Y. And at the moment we're auditing them against X, whatever contractor it is. So if the weeds, if the lawn's grown up around the headstones, for example, and that's not specified, that's a completely made up thing, but if that's not specified in the contract, then the audit would be that they are complying with the current contract.
Bear in mind, the council's not responsible for the grave sites themselves.
No, this isn't for the general grave sites, but, it was particularly disturbing in the last 12 months. There was definitely a lot less care and attention taken into the maintenance of the cemeteries, both Ross and Hokitika. Quite a lot, and I got a lot of feedback from a lot of community members.
Certainly spiked during lockdown and never just thereafter with letters and stuff, but I think I definitely remember it too, and that's why it came up here at our last meeting. We questioned it, and I think that was the action that the executive team did that audit and actually see now. So that doesn't necessarily mean in the last 12 months everything has been exactly how we like it, but when they undertook the audit, current conditions are being met.
Through the chair, the issue, I think as we talked last meeting, in my view, was the central section, the old heritage section of the cemetery, which was overgrown, and although you said it was made up about grass growing up around the headstones, it wasn't. That's what
I gave that as a.
No, that's exactly what was happening.
That was, yeah.
And it was pretty unkempt in parts that had in the past been kept knocked down. And I think that's what the concern was mostly about. That the heritage graves on either side of RSA plot 1. Going back to the Brearley lookout, I just wonder whether in the long term the solution might be to reactivate our local committee to just have oversight of that. So our committee that developed that back in the early 2000s, disbanded once we handed it over to the council. Job was done in the council and said they're going to look after it, etc. And we believed it. And but they were mostly elderly people as well, and you know, until that time, they had gone down. They did the lawns and the gardens regularly, kept it all shipshape. Since then, there's really been little attention to it, and I think probably a community group that just keeps an eye on things and is prepared to go in and do that extra maintenance that's beyond what can be afforded with the Westroads contract might be the answer. Because otherwise I think we'll be back here in another 12 months' time and I'll be complaining again about the willow trees growing up, you know, blocking the view, because they grow that quickly, unless you keep on top of it. And now there are, you know, a lot of newer residents out around Woodstock that may well come on board and help.
Does that fit in or tie in with the work around the Kanieri domain in terms of, or is it like both separate sides of the river? We're not going to talk to each other.
Ooh.
You know, in terms of actually, could you look at a centralised route for both areas, or do you feel it needs to be separate?
Put it this way, we had great difficulty with trying to get the Woodstock School war memorial moved from Woodstock to Remu, 500 metres up the hill. So to extend that to Canary, I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay.
And if the groups,
I'm just thinking about how we actually formalise that within a council and you know, within the structures, and we have a lot of subcommittees and things that it could feed into, but setting up another one.
well,
Yeah,
see, through the chair,
existing, isn't it?
through the chair, the Canary group is as you know, is active. They built that little shelter and the interpretation panels are about to go up. And dare I say it, in a few years' time, they'll be in the same position as really, unless someone locally keeps an eye on it.
Just through the chair, the Parks and Reserves Committee exactly in terms of an oversight group. You can take that along. And
having the local guardians, you know, people that are neighbours to feed into that, so that can still be formalised as a group that inputs into that Parks, Reserves and Environment Subcommittee. Because I'm just trying to get my head around, because it was the same with trying to find out where the group that's operating with the Canary Domain, where that sits at the moment, it's probably the same space, feed into that committee, that subcommittee, sorry. And that subcommittee needs to then be empowered to be able to communicate to the executive team, and then those things be done. Otherwise, that's when people become disenfranchised. Just meet for meeting's sake, and then it gets goes on.
Through the chair, though, I think it's quite important that these community groups still, to a degree, you know, do have some responsibility for those areas. Like, I wouldn't like to see, you know, it all kind of pulled in under one one structure facilitating all of that. You know, I think it's important, you know, on Woodstock, Canary, I mean, Fremont do the same, Cockatoo, Kororangi do the same. It's them taking ownership of their areas, really, and, you know, that requires volunteer time from members that live in those areas to do it. And I think that, you know, I'm sure that if people knew that they were, you know, looking for new members, that there would be others that.
So is the action here just in terms of how
just through the chair, can I just make one more comment?
Yeah.
Part of the last Parks and Boroughs group, the one prior to council forming a subcommittee, we developed a policy around all these, you know, new monuments and everything that goes with adding, I suppose, new functions or features to look at areas. It follows a policy and that gets endorsed by this group here. But also as part of that process is an MOU with relevant groups to determine who does what, whether it's council maintained or the group maintains, etc. So it actually really clearly stipulates how it's managed for the future life of that asset, so that for example, some of the seats were put down, or seat that was running well lane, the Lions Club are maintaining that as part of the MOU for the life of that new asset, so that we know who takes the ownership for those ongoing maintenance issues or refurbishment issues. It's just pretty clear that has everyone's seen that policy, because we can circulate it again for this group as an action.
Through the chair, how is that actually though, once those MOUs are put in place, how is it monitored to ensure it is still getting done?
Well, it depends on who does the monitoring in the MOU. For example, for putting a monument in place, which has been, there's been few of them over the last few years, it's very clearly the onus on the person installing it to maintain it to the right standard.
That's an interesting one. We will put a copy of that in Microsoft Teams for everyone to have a look at, the monument, the policy on, I think, public art, monuments and the like. In terms of an action, do you need any support from this committee to rally the Woodstock residents, Woodstock Remu residents, in terms of expressing interest for, you talk about new people living there, is there anything we can support with?
I'll talk to Mickey Cannon. I think we could probably organise things.
Okay.
If we have any lack of enthusiasm, I'll come back.
Yeah. Cool. Right. Parks, Reserves and Environment Subcommittee did meet. The minutes of that are available in Teams. And just to touch on that, it was quite a good meeting. Like I said earlier, foreshadowed that it got into quite a bit of detail around specific reserves and specific areas, and that's great. And we set in place a mechanism where we're trying to lift the discussion back into policy, but also realising that that's why we have that subcommittee. We have that subcommittee to be the interface between what we make, decisions we make here, and what's actually happening in our community. So that's kind of where that got to. We adopted we recommended to adopt, or we did adopt, the terms of reference. The funding committee, I'm just looking, the Creative Community Scheme Funding Committee has met, and Councillor Neil and myself and a large number of really keen community members ably supported by Sarah Brown, made some funding decisions, I want to say this early July, and that was really good and beneficial. And hopefully we're going to see lots of great things come from that funding. I'm just looking through and thinking what else. I support the movement of that Hokitika Central Business District plan going to planning and regulatory, but with the ability for this committee to input into aspects around the parks and reserves and the things that the community are seeking.
Through the chair, because there's still some question marks too around maintenance, isn't there?
It always keeps coming up.
Which doesn't seem to be getting resolved, and I think COVID has not really helped that cause either, has it?
Maintenance. So there was a bit of a discussion at that same meeting. There are some things underway right now to address some of the maintenance, substandard maintenance issues. We have taken up directly with NZTA some of the main highway maintenance concerns. It's fair to say we didn't get a very good reaction regarding that, so we're taking it a little bit further. But the CBD, we're getting pricing now for the cleaning of the tiles internally in the CBD. So that's underway, getting that pricing done. The trial's been conducted, and it looks like it works well. The device that's used in Grandma will use it here.
The theme that came very strongly through that subcommittee meeting was we build a lot of good things, but we're not so good at maintaining them.
That's right.
So that's where we need to get better.
Yeah.
So I think we've all heard that, and certainly I very much endorse it, but we have to know, we need to know that comes at a cost, and the community need to see that. If we want an increased level of service, it's going to mean an increased level of cost.
And through the chair as well, like, I mean, we're talking specifically here, I know about the central business area here, but, you know, there's been a number of concerns raised in the past, even around, you know, the likes of the Ross and the Ross Township area and, you know, travelling even further south. So I'd like to see more work done around something being put in place for all of the areas, not just specifically just for Hokitika.
So I think when it comes to council with the LTP recommendation to increase the maintenance budget, that's when we're going to have a really robust discussion, because that's where we can actually say that, you know, get those things in effect change, because it's a pretty consistent message throughout the district, I think. Yeah. Okay, is there any other questions or clarification around the action list? The only thing further that I attended the Heritage West Coast AGM and Forum on Saturday, just gone, which was very enlightening, and we had a great kōrero from Paul around history here on the coast. And
that's not like you fault a bit old.
and from Francois too around the Panama pathway, but where that connects to this is around that culture and heritage subcommittee. And I'm wondering whether the establishment of that might potentially be an umbrella for the Hokitika Museum Governance Group in the interim, in the sense that we have Heritage Hokitika, the Heritage Park, and Heritage West Coast, and yourself, and others represented to at least support the transition through the museum, whatever the future looks like. Because there's two subcommittees there to form, really. That's a bit chicken and egg, and I wonder if that culture and heritage subcommittee might be able to support the kaupapa around the museum.
Through the chair, don't they have enough form?
It's just they're not formed yet. That's the problem. Oh, you mean in terms of those community groups coming and sitting on it? Yeah. I'm just trying to streamline it, because we've got this action to establish a culture and heritage subcommittee primarily responsible for the cultural tourism strategy, isn't it?
The intention is to get synergies between all the parties to create a line of sight in terms of what we're trying to achieve with culture and heritage, and obviously leveraging any funding that's available as well. So working with council and with the relevant bodies within Westland to make sure that the projects are all supported, you know, that we're fully aware of what the projects are, that with the right funding sources are actually identified, but also to work on the same pathway together, particularly around what everyone's trying to actually execute, because they're all crossing. There's some areas where there's cross purposes, everyone working on different things, but they're all trying to do the same thing, if you know what I mean. So they're creating an alignment. I'm not saying that this group would take over those other entities, but there are some roles that the group would take that actually double down on what the other entities do as well. So we just got to be careful we don't try to create too much work with the same outcomes that everyone else is trying to do.
That's why I wonder whether getting that group established, because it's an action to do that, as the first step, and allowing Heritage Hokitika and the Heritage Park and Heritage West Coast to put forward representation, and iwi to put forward representation, may start those discussions during the transition period of the museum, whatever that looks like, because otherwise we're going to have to call on probably very similar people to be represented on both groups, I would say. And we're going to put it off, and we're going to be 12 months into the term of the 3-year election cycle, and just get it, just get going. So I don't know, through that ramble, if I was concise in saying I think it would be great to establish that culture and heritage subcommittee and get that, at least to have a meeting with representation from those groups as a first step.
You have to really identify what the purpose of that subcommittee is all about, what's it going to be empowered to actually do and make decisions on. Are we talking about the future of the new museum? In terms of that project, it's quite a big piece of work as well. The archives, in terms of all those processes around that, linking in with future funding applications, in terms of cultural heritage tourism. So there's quite a number of things that fit inside that portfolio that we need to be very clear what that group's meant to be doing.
I would like to see that group recommend to us what they think they should do in terms of levels, interest and support for that, because I agree with everything you've just said. It's just making sure that those parties are all in the same room and understand what they're achieving. And I don't think we're going to be able to sort that right in terms of reference. I think we need to get all those groups in the room and say, what does this actually look like? How do we work together?
Potentially there's a workshop prior to forming that group to actually understand the benefits that we're trying to achieve out of it. So maybe that's the action that we actually workshop this.
Are people happy with that?
I think that's important, because what that also addresses who are all the stakeholders. Because I mean, if you think of it, I definitely agree with what you were saying. I do think that they are all relevant stakeholders, but
there may be others.
Absolutely, and if you workshop that, I think,
There's obviously a lot of work happening in the one district plan space around culture and heritage as well. Double dips in some areas as well, but obviously it's around that rolls around protecting heritage more than anything else. But we also have to be conscious there's heritage groups down south that will need to be included in this process as well. And
So we've got an action there around workshopping that prior to the next Community Development Committee meeting.
we'll look at the agenda. We'll look at the next.
Well, that's the thing I have, is this constant tension between we need to advance it, but that realisation that we're becoming very heavily loaded with committees and subcommittees. So it's no point in us establishing something if we know it can't be serviced. And that's why I'm saying, well, it's like, let's work out what it is, what the purpose is, and is it beneficial? Otherwise, we should have another discussion around how we can make it work smarter.
You're saying that the calendar's pretty full right now, but we'll work through in terms of finding a good date for everyone.
Cool, thank you very much, Simon. Someone prepared to move that the action list be received? Councillor Davidson, second. Councillor Neal, all those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Favourite part of the agenda, presentations, agenda item 6. The first up is a presentation from Winston Industrial Heritage Park on the Heritage Park project. Now, welcome Ian Gilbertson to speak to the committee.
Good evening, everybody. I won't waffle on too much. I've got David Verrill, my colleague. Apologise for Bob Gagan, who, believe it or not, is away skiing at the moment. Just a very quick background about the Heritage Park. When we first started up, believe it or not, it was 20 years ago this year, and we actually managed the council's collection, which was ex-West Roads and overflow from the museum, and we've also acquired a lot of artefacts and machinery and all sorts of things. When we first started off, we were really concentrating a bunch of blokes going up having fun with old machinery. And over the last 20 years, the park has really evolved into now very much a family park where we're doing much more than just machinery. So there's quite a lot of exciting things happening at the park. And really, I'd suggest if you really want to get a grip on what's happening, you need to come up and, as a group, possibly, we could entertain you for a couple of hours and show you what's actually going on. It'll be well worthwhile. I made a couple of bullet points of things that I just wanted to cover. Firstly, Simon and his team came up last month, and we had a really good discussion about things that we thought the council could help us with, and I'm not quite sure whether that's going to be done directly by Simon or through this group. And we made a bit of a wish list of things that we wanted to happen. We're very much aware that there's a lot of, as we call it, funny money around at the moment. And our biggest need at the moment is to have a really nice entrance display area with toilets inside. And Simon's taken that on board. And it would be really nice to know that one of these funds that the government's providing would pay for all or some of that. So we're still hoping that that'll happen. So just in the last 5 years, we've built display sheds up there, which have actually cost more than $250,000. We've got a new museum of fire, and the fire brigade, local volunteer fire brigade, are helping us with that. They are building 2 bays, and they're going to take all their equipment up there. So the building alone, that's cost us $50,000. We've just been successful with a lot of grants for a major revamp of the big engine shed. We're going to have a big surround sound, audio visual story about the history of forestry, sawing, mining, and fishing that happened way back in the Dindarts. And of course, the Mudfish Railway is really, it's going to happen probably, to finish it all, probably might take another 5 years, but we've got stage 1, which will have it up and running by November at the latest, provided we are successful in getting an amusement licence to run the railway. The 2 new lotto sheds that we've built, which are large, and one of them is empty at the moment. So we've got plans afoot to actually put really good displays in them, and of course they don't come cheap. So when Judith Taylor was here, we were having a really good dialogue, and she arranged for some of her colleagues to come down from Te Papa to give us some advice, but that's sort of dried up a little bit since Judith is gone. We were having, or proposing to having monthly meetings with Judith, so we're missing out on that a little bit. But what we've realised is that we don't have, well, we think we might have the expertise, but we probably don't. We've got the enthusiasm, but we probably need some expertise and backing. So we're just starting up on a joint venture with Trustpower, who are really keen. They're coming down next month to actually help us set up a display which will highlight the workings of one or both of the hydro schemes locally, moving bits and pieces and all this sort of models. And we're also in dialogue with the dairy factory, because there's such a huge story that we can tell at the park with dairying, milking, butter, powder, and all this of it. Yeah, those are some of the highlights. The volunteers are still chugging away up there. We're getting a lot more ladies joining us. The Untitled Garden Club has joined us, and they're adopting plots around the park and doing landscaping work. I guess one of the biggest things that's happening is Jackie Goodman and David Stapleton have done their culture and heritage tourism development project, and of course we're a key component of that. So that hopefully will make it easier for us to attract finance for our toilets and sheds. We've been talking to the Hokitika Museum about getting access to the photo library down there for one of our projects in the big engine shed. Unfortunately, there's only Vaughan and Sue and Helen on reduced hours. So, but they're quite happy for us to go down and help ourselves under their direction to actually get access to those photographs, so that's really good. And it's possible that we could actually work together with council and a new strategic plan for the Hokitika Museum whenever it happens. It's possible that some of the displays that are going into storage could go up to the park on a 6 months, 12 months basis rotation wide. So there's a real opportunity for us to work together with council and the museum to do some of those things. David's actually carrying out a major upgrade of the livery and the stagecoach and all of the bits and pieces, the leatherwork especially, and that's really coming up really nicely. We want you to give our toilets back that you gave us. You gave us 2 toilets which were surplus from the Freedom Camping. And they were going to be delivered on Monday, but they got taken down to Wataroa on Friday because of a new toilet's being made down there, but they haven't come back yet. So, yeah. And lastly, I just wanted to say is that one of the big things is we feel as though we're now fast becoming a major tourist attraction for visitors, and we probably need some help from council, eyesight, tourism West Coast, for a pretty realistic publicity and marketing plan. There's a real shortage of signage around the place to tell the people as to where we are, and we're missing out. And we mentioned that to Simon, and dare I say it, is that once you've got a good plan, which we now have with Jackie Goodwin and David Stapleton's plan, and we're part of this, all these things that are happening with tourism and culture, is that I presume getting the money isn't going to be too difficult. We haven't had too much difficulty getting grants from all sorts of sources, but we still need to have a really robust plan about our publicity and marketing. So we'd like to think that the council might even make some of their staff available, or Destination Restaurant might be able to assist us to actually make some progress with that. So that's really all I wanted to say. It was just a bit of an update. If you do feel as though you want to come up to the park, don't hesitate to ask, and we'll turn it on for you. So if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to ask, but
Thanks very much, Ian. Please, just in case there are some questions, are there any questions from committee members?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, Gilby. Have you got is there a landscape concept plan for the park up there?
Yeah, we have.
Oh.
Yeah. We've been very fortunate. We got a Biodiversity community grant over 3 years. We've got $25,000, and Onjo's manages that with us. So we're actually that's complementing the roadway development, or replanting, and we're just putting up interpretation panels at the moment. And we're going to start talking to Doc about extending that grant. There's a wonderful opportunity to have a boardwalk through the bush, and feedback we've had from Doc on what we're doing has been very positive. So it's starting to look really nice up there.
Gilby,
we do have a plan.
Are you able to come up here, sorry, just for the sound, just for the audio and everything, and so councillors can be heard through the mic system and on the camera? That would be really useful. Sorry, just we all go that way, the mics don't capture everything.
So, was that enough?
No, that was good, Gilby. And in terms of the vision, like what's the vision up there? Is it?
Well, you should be like me, Tacker. You should sit down and read all those wanky reports that Jackie Goodwin and David Stapleton done. Actually, it's a very comprehensive. In the first one they did in 2017, was it the glossy one, and then the one they did for the Western District. The park vision has changed since we first started. It's now becoming much more, as I said, a family park with opportunities for rides on the trains, fire engine rides, as well as seeing the big engines with this spectacular thing that we're going to do. And also working with Doc to actually talk about conservation and the environment, the history, the sawmilling, the logging that took place up there, the fact that there's rare and endangered mudfish in the ponds up there, and yeah, so that's all listed in the overall concept plan.
Thanks, Gilby. It looks, I've been up there a few times, and what you guys have done up there is tremendous. You know, looks really good.
Enthusiastic people.
Yeah.
You'll be on the list shortly. The only reason I retired from Doc was because I couldn't keep up with the work up.
I didn't think you wanted people. I think you wanted Chickaleen.
Deputy Mayor Carruthers.
Yeah, how you going in terms of personnel and people? Because the bigger you get, the more extensive your activities become. You've got to provide. You need to provide people to do the work and provide the service.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue. So
Is that a problem going through?
But at the moment, we run a roster system during the summer months, and then we drop back in the winter months to Wednesday and Saturday, but then a roster on during the school holidays. Some of the criteria for some of this government grants appear to rely on the ability to actually provide employment, and I think that's what we've missed out on some of the provincial growth fund. And we're just talking about that at the moment as to whether we can actually, how we can actually work that, where we perhaps look at getting a couple of people there being paid by government grants. Doc, we've got one, Jobs for Nature at the moment. We're encouraging them to actually to have a look at us and provide a couple of employment opportunities. But yeah, but even just with the railway, we have to have 3 people at least when the railway's running for public safety, and obviously the train driver and the guard and all that sort of stuff. So we will be looking at getting some more members. We've got about 50 at the moment. People come and go. We've got a hard core of about 25 that are there just about every second day. Good wife included.
Oh, that's where she goes.
Ian, I'd like just to congratulate you guys again. I mean, you really are doing a tremendous job, all of you, and what you've created up there over a number of years. But I'm of the same thinking around, you know, that you can only, you know, without taking for granted, you know, all of the volunteer people that have been involved up until now. I mean, that can't always be, and you certainly don't want them to lose, you know, interest because of the time restraints that they may have, because they've got their own lives as well. So I think it would be actually quite helpful, I would think, to, and whether we can actually do that through council, have Ian or the Heritage Park Committee addressed by somebody, and I don't know if that would be through Destination Westland. I would also suggest to you tonight, Ian, you've got 2 members in the audience here, one from Hokitika Promotion and one from Development West Coast, sitting over there, that well, I mean, you've got to, you know, use those opportunities to be able to have discussions with them too around what extra assistance you guys can get, because you've already built a really super package.
We've done the groundwork, and there's no doubt about it that in our community there are people who are struggling, they get lonely and all sorts of things, and then when they retire they have difficulty. We can only play some golf on so many days and things like that. People are tankers and that. Yeah, we are filling a need for people like that, and we're also we are doing a little bit of work with West Reef for people who've got some challenges, who are currently struggling to get employment.
Right.
So, but that's not every day. That's only occasional stuff. So, but that's working, and of course we get lots of brownie points when we do that. Okay.
Just through the chair. Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
There's a couple more questions.
Just in regards to what I mentioned earlier, linking what you do up there with providing, you know, tours based from hopefully a centralised location, that we actually promote the industrial park a lot more. And we can actually organise, you know, dedicated visits up there from tourists in the future. So all of this plays out in terms of a package that Hokitika or Westland can supply as a total package. And linking it, you know, even the town walking tour with another visit to the industrial park and, you know, with the Whanamu Centre, it all creates a nice package for both heritage and culture.
That's right, yeah. So the walking tour people, Charlie and Bradley, they were including the park in their tours sometimes. And they're throwing a bit of money into the donation box.
But I think it could be a ticketed type approach where you book online and you actually get part of a larger, more financial process.
Well, bus tours are the obvious one, but I mean, it's been replaced by people getting the cheap camper vans at the moment. So we're getting quite a few people coming out like that. But yeah, if you knew, like the eyesight was suggesting that if we had a show, a tour at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock, then people will actually come up.
That's right.
And so that's what we're looking at for this coming summer. And that's why it's important for us to get the railway up and running and then be able to get there's a lot happening. But we do need a bit of a hand with publicity and marketing and there's a lot of expertise in council and destination Westland and our side. So we're going to put the pressure on you shortly to give us a hand with that.
Through the chair, so there was some enthusiastic talk a wee while ago about having horse and cart rides from the museum up to the Heritage Park, part of the package that Chief Executive was talking about. Still a nice stupid idea, is it?
The only sort of horse we've got at the moment, we're looking at getting a fiberglass horse.
Smile, Jane. But things like that, yeah, they really are. Yeah.
The museum's relocated and you have a funding pathway and you have a whole heritage hub and then the connection with the heritage park. It's a good opportunity. I just wanted to comment, of course, about the founding father of the park, John Olsen. John Olsen was the founding father of the heritage park, and it's come an awful long way from the days when of the rusty old junk out in the back shed that the county council did.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much, Ian, for your presentation. Nice segue right now into the promotion of Hokitika from the chair of Destination Hokitika, Samuel Blythe. While Samuel's just getting prepared, can we please have a mover to move that we receive Ian Gilbertson's verbal report on Western Industrial Heritage Park? Moved Councillor Neil, seconded Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. And kia ora, good evening. Welcome, Samuel.
Yes, good. Okay. And firstly, when you say apologies, I understand you're expecting me at an earlier meeting this year, and there's some confusion over dates, and so I wasn't here, and I apologise for that, but I'm here now. So, as introduced, Samuel Blythe, Chair Destination Hokitika, also one of the major owners of Hokitika Holiday Park, and in terms of promotions, spent quite a lot of the 20 years previous to that with some responsibility for tourism portfolios or international tourism or adventure tourism or inbound operators with Polytechnic. I want to particularly recognise tonight Jenny Cogan, who in a prior life spent some time with the predecessor to Destination Hokitika, and also Lathan, who has come to quite a number of our meetings and provided significant support for us. So we do, I have the slide up there, I've got our branding, Hokitika, the cool little town, although I did wonder whether I should put Destination Hokitika up there because that is the name of our organisation. And on that note, if the council is thinking about its structures and what it does, just a plea from me, we changed the name from Enterprise Hokitika to Destination Hokitika because we're a destination marketing group like every other destination marketing group around the country, and then about 3 weeks later, the council announced Destination Westland, which I understand why it chose the name, but it's not primarily a destination marketing group, and it creates a lot of confusion in the community. So if you're thinking about that, I would just put a plea out there to think about what you do with names. So when I asked to do this presentation, I was asked to talk about what we do with the money council gives us. So in setting that scene, council rates businesses, the business community around Hokitika $39,000 on our behalf, and also we sometimes get grant money for running events like Christmas on the beach and other events that we run around town. Thinking about what it is that we do, I want to start with a little analogy of a hardware store in rural New Zealand. I don't know how many of you remember. We used to have a little hardware store down here on Gribble Street, which was run by one person. I can't even remember his name.
John.
Anderson.
Yeah, and you could walk in there and he knew where everything was. There was a hardware store all like that in a small town in New Zealand, and then they've been operating for about 15 years when a chain store, actually was True Value, opened on their right, and that created some challenges for them with a larger store opening right next door. But it got worse when about 2 years later, my team was Griffin Smith in those days, I think, opened immediately on their left, and the week before they opened, they ran these huge newspaper advertisements about their opening specials, and so the True Value on their right started these advertisements for the sales they were going to do as well. And the guy around the store, his friend said to him, "Are you going to bother opening next week? After all, with that sort of competition, how are you going to do?" And he says, "I'm definitely going to open." He says, "I've had a new sign made to put above my door. It simply said, entrance." And I use that story to illustrate, because in many ways, that's what we see our role as Destination Hokitika. And we can look at that in a variety of ways. The two major attractions on the coast are the Pancake Rocks and the glaciers. And both of these attractions attract hundreds of thousands of visitors to the West Coast every year, with the exception of COVID interruptions. And we're sitting smack bang in the middle. In fact, 6 years ago, we did some work with, we're not Destination Hokitika, but another role, and we did some work with bus operators. So we said to them, what would make the West Coast a more desirable attraction to bring more visitors to? And their response, disappointingly, was, put the Pancake Rocks and the glaciers closer together, so we can do it in a day. Because the reality was, the average tourist on the West Coast spent 1.4 nights on the West Coast. Now, pre-COVID, through a lot of work through a wide range of bodies and the industry, we got that up to a little bit over 1.6. But the reality was that was still the case. 1.6 nights from Karamea down to Haas. And so we're already attracting a large number of visitors to the region. With the size budget that we have, we can't expect to attract hundreds of thousands more, but we can hang up a big entrance sign over Hokitika and say to those people who are coming, hey, this is the place to come to. Another way of looking at that is we look at tourism spend. We've got, Tourism New Zealand has got a budget of about 125 million. We've got Tourism West Coast, which has a budget somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And we've got Destination Hokitika. At the moment, we have a budget of about $45,000. That varies. Was around 70,000, but through various rating changes and internal changes and COVID interruption, it's sitting around $45,000. So that's what we see ourselves as doing, where we see ourselves as sitting. So historically, in terms of promotions, there were three main things that we did. We produced this wee little brochure here, and you can see various editions of it throughout the years. 60,000 copies of these were printed each year and distributed. So we put them in the main gateway, so in Christchurch, in Nelson, and then in 100 or so places around the broader West Coast and down at Southland as well. Interesting for Industrial Heritage Park, we've got a whole page in here for you that we do free. For our members, they pay to go in here. But for the likes of Industrial Heritage Park, so we distribute 67,000 full page adverts for Industrial Heritage Park we do each year. So interesting data on this, because I'm in the accommodation sector. I ask every person who comes in my door, how did you hear about me? And being totally honest, I haven't had one yet. It's just, I saw you in that Hokitika brochure. But then I also understand that people, when they come in, have often seen you in 2 or 3 places, and they tend to tell you the last place they saw you. But I'll pick on another business in town, the Kiwi Centre in town over here. So we did a survey there, and so when people came in, they were asked, have you seen this? And 1/3 of the visitors to the Kiwi Centre said, yes, we've seen that. We've had a look at that brochure. And so it still has a reasonable amount of effect. Currently, the printing is on hold for this year because getting advertisers in the middle of COVID has been really, really difficult, but we're taking a look at that again in the next year or two. Sorry, in the next month or two. The other thing we produce an awful lot of is this map, which has a map on one side, and on the other side, it's got a whole listing of businesses, and again, the Industrial Heritage Park will go on the map. And we, again, distribute about 60,000 copies of these every year. So these sit in businesses in town, in garages, accommodation providers, and when someone says to the receptionist, what is there to do, or where am I going to go for dinner, then we write on here, show them what to do. There's a whole pile of things that are listed, and that goes off. So we get up to 60,000 people a year who are walking around town with a map of town. And I'll probably come back to that a little bit later. And then the third thing we have is on the website, we again promote the members on various ways. And if you Google Hokitika, the destination Hokitika site, hokitika.org, comes up top every time, partially because of the name, but partially also because the website has a lot of quite deep content in it, and so it lists well with all the rankings. There's some challenges, but it has that going for it. So there's a lot of traffic that goes through the website. For a moment, I want to reflect on this because this has been an issue of discussion for us as a committee. Unfortunately, the TV hides the green dot. Thinking about tourism towns, or even just towns, on one end of the spectrum, you've got towns which are a pass-through town, and for want of a better example, and apologies to anyone from there, I think you're like Ashburton. Not that many people go to Ashburton for Ashburton, but there's a lot of tourists that do a loop on the bottom half of the South Island and will pass through Ashburton, and some of them will stay there. It's a very popular first night spot. People pick up camper vans, they want to drive a little way and stay and carry on. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got towns like Queenstown, which is very clearly a destination town. People come to New Zealand to go to Queenstown. People come to the South Island to go to Queenstown. A high percentage of visitors who come to Queenstown. So one of the questions we've been asking ourselves is, where is Hokitika on that spectrum? So I'm going to put it to you tonight. I want you to think, where are we on that spectrum? How many of you think that we're like smack bang in the middle between these two markers here?
Is this where we think we are?
Yeah,
currently,
where
or
we think we are now. Where do you think
want to be?
Hokitika sits on that spectrum? Does anyone think we sit in the middle here?
Yeah,
Does everyone think we sit this side of it?
yeah, I do. That's right.
Kind of here? Or even here?
I think even further down.
Way over here. Yep, and in fact, one of the challenges we have,
You left a little
it's a touch screen.
that's a rice up there.
Sorry, yeah. So, Tourism West Coast has done its icons and has made the gorge an icon. And that has some really beneficial things, because we know the glaciers aren't going to be there forever. And if we can turn the gorge into another major icon, hopefully we'll still get a lot of visitors coming through. In the short term, it actually causes us quite a lot of pain, because the number of people who come to Hokitika and have been sold on the gorge, so they come and go out to the gorge and then come back only as far as the Canary Bridge and then drive south is really, really high. So we've got some challenges around that. And in fact, one of the things when we looked at the analytics for our website was we had the same. The number of people who came to our website, looked at the Hokitika Gorge, disappeared off, was actually close to 70% of those who visited the gorge page didn't go anywhere else, which is similar to the numbers of people who come back in from the gorge not coming into town. So we've done some changes on our website. We've got some more that we're doing, which has dramatically changed that, and so that more people are spending longer time on our website, not just looking at the gorge. But we need to think about that, how we deal with that practically when they're here as well. So the next question is, where do we want to be? Because this is a question I think we have to ask ourselves. The business community has to ask itself, but the community also has to ask itself this question. Because there is a focus that we want more people to come to Hokitika, for Hokitika. We want more people to come to Hokitika and spend more than one night. But how far along that line do we want to go? So I'll put that to you again. I won't touch the screen this time. How many think we should become a destination town like Queenstown?
A destination town, not a second Queenstown.
How many think that Queenstown is too tourist focused?
Yeah.
And we shouldn't quite become as much a destination as them? Yeah? Yeah, and our committee sits in a very similar position. We want to shift along that spectrum, but we don't actually want to be down the other end. And so we've been thinking about how do we define that. We've been asking ourselves, what do we like about Hokitika? Then we ask ourselves the question, what do visitors like about Hokitika? Because interestingly enough, one of the things that is commonly said both to businesses in town and to accommodation providers by people visiting is, such a cool place. If I'd known, I would have planned to spend more time here. But issues like, I'm flying out of Christchurch tomorrow or the next day, or I'm booked in the glaciers to fly up to the glaciers tomorrow. But what we like about the town, what visitors like about the town, aren't necessarily the same thing. So we actually, we're working on some research proposals with both Lincoln and Canterbury University around identifying what it is that visitors identify with Hokitika and connect with that make them want to return, so that we could use that in our promotional material to attract the right type of visitor who wanted to come back again and again and again. But then things like COVID happened and that went a little bit out the window. But one of the things we realised is that when we think about the issues of a town like Queenstown, is that there is a discrepancy between what the locals like and what the visitors like. And so for us, we said, what is it that we like about Hokitika? And if the locals like, and if we can promote that to visitors and have the visitors who are coming to the region, or the ones that are being attracted to stay here, be similar to what locals like, then that's actually a really nice place to be along that spectrum. But if we went too far, then what the visitors like would diverge from what the locals like, and then it's no longer the place that everyone wants to be. So that's kind of what's guiding our thinking around that at the moment. So, ignoring the research that we were on the beginning path of, we said, well, in the current environment, we're obviously not going to get very many international visitors, so thinking more about our domestic market, what messages engage with our domestic market. So we undertook a social media campaign that was actually designed around providing us with information around what people identified Hokitika with and what interested them. And so there were three themes that came through, and some of these pictures are good, some of them are a bit fuzzy because they were cut and pasted off our social media site, so they didn't blow up very well. So we had three themes. We had a theme around create, and some sub-themes in there was like, come to Hokitika and you can carve your own banana, or you can do a sculpture on the beach. But we also picked up some heritage themes in there as well. we had a theme that came through about nature, and we had a theme about coming to Hokitika to slow down and have a slow holiday. And that message really resonated. Fascinatingly enough, one of the themes that really came through to us through this was that Hokitika is on the map. How do we know that? And you know, there's a whole pile of reasons why that is. I think events like the Wild Foods Festival have really put Hokitika on the map. Actually, to me, as social media presence really puts Hokitika on the map too. But one of the reasons that we knew coming out of this Hokitika was on the map is that when we displayed ads like the one on the left, which is Mahinapua, Lake Mahinapua, which could have been anywhere in the country, we got much lower engagement than when we got scenes that were clearly out of either Hokitika or in our local area. So in that one, we've got local steps of Mount Cook and Mount Tasman on the back, or whether it was the clock tower, or whether it was the Hokitika sign, or whether it was the custom house. All of these things that were unique about Hokitika got significantly more engagement from people, which tells me that they actually know a little bit about Hokitika. So we did, give or take, 250,000 ads. We got engagement from 115,000 people. And that formed the basis of our feedback. So in the create thing, this was the creating heritage, I should say the creating heritage. This was created the strongest initial engagement, but one of the things that was clear to us is when people came through to our website, there was actually not enough about creating about heritage, because they didn't spend a long time on our website and there wasn't a lot of content in that space. So we're doing some work around that. The nature theme was reasonably strong, but not as strong as we had expected. And the strongest theme was around go slow. Come to Hokitika and chill out, sit by the fire, look at the stars, relax on the beach. And that was a message that resonated most with people who, the 115,000 people who viewed the ads. So that was some food for us to think about, and so we're rebranding our marketing messages, and then we're doing our website with some of those themes in mind. Coming back to things which kind of might be more of relevant to this group, although I hope you found that interesting. So think about things that intersect with council and town district planning that are very important to us. So one of the things that's on our radar is walkability. And I know that it's on the council radar as well. We've had a number of discussions around it, but we believe that there's still more work to do to make the central town area more walkable. Get people out of their cars, not parking right in front of the shop they want to go to, but make it more pedestrian friendly. And anything down that line we really support. Signage, come back to that one. Cycling, and was it this group that had a presentation from Dave Ritchie? I know there was some committee that had we put together a draft cycling strategy for the region. And it looked at, I'll make sure you get a copy of it and send this on. And we looked at what we have in the way of cycling now, what with a little bit of change, we could have this really nice network, and what would require a little bit more work. Now, the Wilderness Trail is an awesome asset for the area, and it's been one of the things which has seen us extend the number of nights that people spend in the region. But we also have some undersold assets in Mountain Bike Club and some of its trails and some of the other cycling options, which would bring a broader group of people or families where there's different cycling abilities within the family or group. So there's some work that we can do together on that. Beachfront development and some good work is going on in that space at the moment. This is going a little bit sideways. Sorry, I did this in Keynote and then exported it to PowerPoint, so something's gone a little funny there. We're obviously always keen to support any events and run some events ourselves. And then, yeah, we won't worry about where it's appeared on the screen. Certainly on our radar, which I hear has been, so obviously on your radar as well, as issues around street appeal and cleanliness, and pleased to see that on your radar. And one of the things that has come up to us time and time again is the toilets down the end of River Street here on the beach and going into the, you know what I'm talking about. But the one I will just take another, say, 4 minutes or so to talk to you about is signage. So I want you to think about this in the context of when you're revising or looking at the district plan and the annual plan. So Simon's doing some good work and looking at some signs of this sort of nature, and the biggest feedback that we gave around these going into town was we really want that map there to be the same as this map here. Now, I don't really care whether, and I think we're on the same page here, so we don't really need to spend too much time here. But the reality is we have 60,000, up to 60,000 people walking around town with a map. We should make sure that everyone's giving them the same map for recognising those things. And again, this again goes in with the walkability thing. The thing that we want to happen kind of in conjunction with that, and I've put up several options here from several different places, but I have my personal like is one, something like the top right hand one, but it's only personal preference. But at the moment, if you come into town, there's street signs which are clearly designed for car traffic. But if you're not driving a car, and if you're not from here, it's not obvious necessarily where those street signs are. It's not obvious where a whole pile of things are. And we've got various other signs. We've got a museum sign here, we've got a police sign here, we've got a sign on that side. But what we would like to see, and I think we put a discussion paper to council sometime last year, I think, was some sort of directional signage, probably where our view separates a little bit from some councillors. That we'd like to see some of those signs. I mean, some of them we'd like to have, have the museum, have the police station, have, a walking route to Tambo, have some of the work that Jackie and David are doing around various precincts and heritage stuff. But we think that there's value in having some businesses being able to actually have their individual business names on those signs. And let me give you an example, which would be like top of the thing for me. I think about the National Kiwi Centre. So we've got in Hokitika the National Kiwi Centre. We've got in Hokitika a gallery that is amongst the top 10 in New Zealand on TripAdvisor. We've got a whole pile of cool things in town, and if we really, what we want to do is we want to have people who are on the street walking around going, oh, I know I can walk to that, I'll do that before I leave. So I think there would be benefit, and I don't have a business in town, so it's no skin off my nose, I'm not going to be on those signs, but I think it would be benefit for council to think whether that should be an allowable activity in the plan, having those signs and the ability for businesses who would obviously pay to be on those signs. I'll leave that with you. All right. Entrance signs to town. I was up in Westport last weekend and I took a sign of this because I think this is a great sign. I mean, it's a little bit tired now, but it says for Switzerland, see Queenstown, like New Zealand, see Westport. And again, there's a little bit of a difference between council perspective and destination Hokitika perspective. So our perspective is that a lot of people who are driving down the road are passing past Hokitika, and we want to convince them to come into Hokitika. And I think that, I might be mistaken, but I think part of the perspective of council in the past has been that if people are on the road, they're already coming to Hokitika. So again, we're keen to see some signs on highways that give people a second thought about actually Hokitika, we're on the road, we're open for business, come in and see us. And the last one in that vein is the gorge. And I've talked a little bit about the gorge. Council has road reserve at the gorge. Let me just take a step back. At the north and south of town, we have, I don't know what to call it, we have an information station and there's a wee roof and there's signs that are managed by Lions officers. Rotary, sorry, by Rotary. And I was thinking about them the other day and thought, you know, what would be really cool is if they were places that a lot of people stopped and they saw a range of things. And I think about that at the gorge, because when people come to the gorge, they stop in the car park, they get out of the cars, they go for a walk, they come back. And again, at the gorge under the current planning, we could potentially put up a sign that's, you know, promoted Hokitika. But I think actually a panel of signs that showcased some of the unique businesses of Hokitika or whatever, whoever was willing to advertise on them, that told people, hey, come into Hokitika, would help get more people from the gorge into town. That's the end of me droning on. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Code.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation, Sam. It was very informative, and I have to say that I've heard nothing but great things. I think now that Destination Hokitika have reinvented themselves, and I think a lot of that has had to do with you as well coming along with as a fresh face and bringing some new energy. Yeah, that I know you guys are making some really steady progress. The only thing there was only one thing that I just thought I'd raise with you, and it was around your point around we talk about create.
Yeah.
That I think we still have to be a little bit careful about that, because it was, you know, it refers to creating Pounamu, creating driftwood, but we're quite limited. In fact, we're very limited to what those things are. So, and that then falls under expectation. You know, when we say if we're going to put up the word create, you know, and then they turn up here and there's one place where they can create or jade. You know, yes, on a good day they might be lucky to create some good pieces down the beach, or either that'll get washed away with depending on the tide. So yeah, I just
That's a very fair comment. That's a very fair comment. And one of the things we have been doing is we've been encouraging some of the other businesses to think down that line.
Yeah.
And I think there is a second jade place that is doing a little bit of that. And we've also been working with some people who are looking at doing night sky stuff, photography. You're right, there's limited space, but there seems to be a significant appetite around it. We didn't put a lot into that space, we got a lot of response.
So if there is, then maybe it just needs more encouragement.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the one thing that I'll, and I do absolutely support you guys around is one, and that's an interesting question, signage being an allowable activity in the downtown area. I understand the absolute value of getting more signage like that up. But I also understand around the importance of the signage. I know you've talked about Hoki Gorge, but I do often wonder too, and it's something I have heard a lot of, is Hoki Gorge and Treetop Walk. Now, both of them are out of Hokitika.
Yeah.
So, you know, like if you talk about signage and a signage board, you know, they're probably two, I would say, of the iconic areas that, and we need to encourage at those spots to say, okay, well now rather than thinking, okay, in an hour and a half now I can be in France, oh, hang on a minute, you know, actually if I go back into town, because that theory around what people say is not just, it's proven that everyone always says there's so much, we wish we had known. We would have stayed for the night had we have known there were all these other things that we could do, but we don't promote that enough, and I don't think that we advertise it well enough to be able to, for people to understand just how easy it would be. you know?
So we've got a really good relationship with Treetop Walkway, and quite a number of our members have got signs out there, and they're also doing a whole section out of their car park
Yeah.
where businesses can put up signs. And then a number of businesses in town are also promoting treetops. And there are some packages out there that include treetops and other activities as well. So there's reasonable signage going on out there, and I don't think we want the highway club with as many signs as going out of treetops, but I think we do want a little bit more than we can.
Yeah.
At the moment, and one of the, and to be fair, we have made progress in this, and it's gone a little bit on the back burner with COVID and with other priorities, and we've shuffled some money around, put more onto a social media presence for the New Zealand market. But one of the reasons I raise it here is that one of the things we face with each of these is what has to go to a resource consent because it's not allowed in the district plan, and so it's an exception to the district plan. And so I'm raising it for this group for you to think about in terms of when you revise that plan, what do you want the council to do, what do you want us to do, what do you want to be allowable? And, you know, we don't want downtown for there to be 30 different types of signs. That's one of the reasons why we're supporting Simon, we'll work with those signs, but then thinking if we had one other sign, so you know, the museum's got one sort of looking sign, the police is another sort of looking sign, and this is another sort of looking sign, that all the signs for pedestrians look the same, it's managed in a coherent way, and then I think we'll look all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cogan. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple there.
Sure.
Sam, very good presentation there. You know, really good stuff. Some of the stuff like the Hokitika Gorge and the glaciers, you know, they're icon things for Westland, and we should be sort of trying to promote that as much as we can. The rest of the things like the cycle trail, they're it's an and the Panamu are enhancement of this area, and the walkability thing, that's a good thing. So really right behind that. Signage, I like the idea of signage, like a logo that goes out from Hokitika to the gorge, and then back again. You know, that's a good thing. Yeah, it's the funny thing about signage though, like direction signs and information signs. There's a place down in just before Queenstown called Arrowtown.
Yep.
And there's a little yellow sign on the road, AA sign pointing to Arrowtown. I think Arrowtown has one of the highest paid visitors of people going to it. So what I'm sort of saying is that people know about that place before the signage. So what we've got to try and do is get this place out there so people come to it. They'll find us. Yeah.
Yep, fair point.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll probably be tarred and feathered for saying this, but I think you've got to be careful with the Hokitika Gorge of over-tourism. And I think we need to make sure that we don't end up killing the goose like the golden egg. I mean, it's you go out there in summertime, the height of summer, and it's crowded.
Yep.
And it's not as pleasant as it used to be. And you know, and I know it's an attraction, and I know it's a way of keeping tourists here, but a lot more around Hokitika. Hokitika in the district is a lot more going for it than just promoting the gorge.
Yep.
And so I'd caution to always be on guard against over-tourism.
I don't disagree. And Destination Hokitika put to Tourism West Coast that Hokitika Township itself should be the icon rather than the gorge. But that decision had already been made by the time they consulted with us. So,
They may have a rethink post-COVID because it's given a reason to step back and have a look at what tourism is what tourism is workable, what tourism is acceptable, what tourism is achievable. I think the missing element here as well is the funding pathway. I didn't hear anything in the presentation about funding the pathway, and it's going to change the landscape of tourism in Hope Ticket. Your group has been looking at ways of how do we get people to stay on, how do we get them to engage more with local activities. Home pathway is intended very much to do that, exactly that, in a different way than you need to look at it through a different lens than what we currently do with tourism. This is about connecting and stories throughout the West Coast. It's about creating a journey and creating destinations. And it's 100% about giving people a reason to stay longer. So I think Funding the Pathway will change the outlook of destination, particularly in a market way.
That's a very fair point. To be fair, I didn't know enough about it yet to put it in the presentation. I have spoken to France on a number of occasions and asked him if there's someone that he thinks from an entrepreneurial perspective should come onto the committee, because I'm very aware that we don't have any representation on there, and that is both with the Panama pathway, but also with a whole lot of other things. That's a perspective that is missing a little bit. So we really welcome that. And certainly happy to embrace that project and support it, promote it.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
No, just I think, Paul, what you're saying about too much tourism can go too far. So my friends Joseph has had that in Queensland, and those two circles that we're showing, really interesting. Just where we sit with how many tourists do the locals want, and how many other tourists do the tourists want. A narrow line. Sometimes do it right.
It is, and so one of the things that we reflected on is the quantity of tourists versus the value of tourists, and having this as a holiday destination where people come and hang out and become city locals is a way of dealing with that. But you're right, we don't want to see it become overpopulated with tourists. But on the other hand, at the moment, what we see with the economy is we're seeing what the absence of tourists does to regional New Zealand. Right, there's a fine balance.
Sure, thanks, Councillor Neil. Samuel, thanks very much for your presentation. Knowledge is power, and I think that was part of it. You've informed. So thank you for that. I also think about so what to do now. What do we do? So the things that I pick up on this is the big S word, signage. It feels like deja vu in a lot of ways. What's the action around the signage stuff? I understand the district plan's reviewed, that's going to be operative in 2026. So, realistically, we're talking 15 years. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
So what are we actually going to do? Last year we got somewhere, I thought, in terms of actually endorsing the concept around directional wayfinder signage throughout the CBD, and I understood that had been ordered.
So in terms of the situation so what Sam was showing with regards to the map, that has been completed in terms of actually the wayfinder signage that hasn't been completed. And so the actual, the map plaques are all under construction now, as far as I'm aware.
So I think one of the things with regard to that, Nathan, is that was my understanding as well, that there was a general consensus with council that they were three good signage projects. One of the challenges from our perspective, and we're happy to drive some of that, but we're also happy for someone on council like Simon who's driven this, and we've provided something what doesn't have to be our project, but it could be. Is for us, one of the cost barriers is the resource consent. And so you see with our sort of budget, by the time we have to go through a resource consent hearing, we're actually contributing quite a lot of our funding for a given year. And so that's why the whole there was some way to have a change in plan that didn't require a resource consent.
My recollection was that it wasn't about changing the plan or not requiring a resource consent. My understanding was that it would be a council-owned sign base.
Yep.
That would get the required resource consent, and that the businesses would put their own nameplates on at an agreed font, colour scheme, etc., which is certainly something that will feed through the town centre plan. I'm not sure what happened to the momentum getting that.
Well, this is what I thank you Fiona for that. So that's really good to know.
Yeah, that's really good to know, because the feedback that had come through to me was that there was no way that we were going to get out there individual businesses with names on those signs.
The thing, without trying to solve the matter tonight, I really do think we need to set a target to solve the matter though. I think it's gone on and on and on and on. I've seen 2015 concepts, I've seen 2005 concepts around signage. It would be great, there's enough collective wisdom within council and within this national sticker to actually pull this one off ahead of Christmas. And that's the challenge that I lay for you. I think it can be done.
Why does it need a resource consent?
Because it's off-site signage. So whatever's in the district plan sits under the RMA, that becomes legislation. So any sign that belongs to a business but isn't on the same title that the business is being undertaken on becomes an off-site sign. So in this instance,
It's pretty sad though when, like I understand where you're coming from, but it's pretty sad when we're trying to generally promote the town,
but the flip side is a multitude of signs or proliferation of signs, which is what the plan's specifically trying to avoid, with everybody putting up whatever they want anywhere because there's nothing to stop them doing it. And having, highways littered with signs and having town littered with signs.
It's a shame that it doesn't fall under resource consent to control that though.
And that's why when we came up with this, the idea was if we see, well, this is a design, okay, and I'm not particularly phased what that design is, but this is the design and they're all the same, then you don't have the look of a proliferation of signs. And if we say, well, we've got a consent to do these signs, and it may actually change what's on each individual thing. One of the things we talked about was doing a promotion on luminaries and putting the luminary street signs up. And again, with the agreed font and colour and everything else. And one of the things that was discussed, although I don't know if it was finalised, some towns have got it so it says, how many minutes walk it is. So if you get a sign at the camp, it's only 3 minutes walk.
That's right, and the beach.
And the beach.
Yeah.
And we're really happy to be involved with that. We don't have to, but again, we're really happy to manage the process of managing what goes on there. And in terms of, if we say, well, on this sign, we've got 3 things, there's no space for individual businesses. This has got 1 thing, there's space for 2 businesses. Then we're happy to manage that process, but again, it doesn't have to be us.
So an action here with the committee's consent, and certainly open to any alternative views around this, is to try and get Destination Hokitika and our executive team in the room and work through a signage plan, picking up on where it's at and implementing it. And then at that point, if the barrier is money, I think where we got to last time was we need to see that come through in some way to council as part of the next annual planning cycle. Because I appreciate it's been dropped.
So
maybe just Simon and I and Fiona.
It's through the chair, obviously, we're doing the town centre planning now, so it actually needs to be incorporated, and that is that piece of body of work.
so that's something that was being captured anyway, because it was something that had been talked about previously, so it was being embodied in the plan. It was the doing of it that has stalled.
So defining, once we've got a defined plan, setting the budget to make sure that plan's executed obviously sits in the long-term plan process, which we have to finalise this side of Christmas as well.
But it's still not going to get the signage up this side of Christmas though, is it?
No, we don't have a budget for it, so it's going to have to be a report to council to spend unbudgeted money.
If we're managing the side of businesses putting up, then I think that it's fair for them to be contributing to those costs. And I don't think any of them would have any issue with that.
Can we set an action then for that? I've heard the comments in the discussion now for destination to meet with Simon Fiona and then come before the next community development committee meeting, so we can have an update on where it's at, but keeping that momentum going. So we're looking to have some signage up for the upcoming tourist season, albeit domestic tourist season, which I'm signalling the summer.
Through the chair, not an essential, but we're not looped into much what's happening with that CBD committee, and obviously our interests overlap a bit. So whether it be reporting from you to us, or whether it be some engagement with that group, would probably be useful.
You should be on.
I think I'll just let the planning and registry manager speak. Sorry, planning and customer services manager.
So
Thank you, that.
there is no committee. There's been a lot of conversation in the past sort of 5 to 10 years, obviously from your group and from wider community. There were some transportation meetings held last year. Prior to that, there were planning meetings.
Yep.
All of that information is being collated into a high-level discussion document.
Right.
So what we're doing is putting the concepts together based on, I guess, the loudest messages we're hearing.
Yep.
And using that as a starting point to talk, because what we're getting obviously is a lot of different groups wanting to see different things happen within the town centre. And so we're taking what we see as feasible within budgets, what the community have been telling us really loudly and clearly and is practical and fits within our township, and we're putting those concepts together so that we've got a high level document to have some more discussions about.
So just to clarify, that signage includes not just Hokitika CBD, we were talking gorge directional signage and return signage to Hokitika approaches on the state highway. You're talking about that one I saw of Westport and Buller, and there was one other, the wayfinders and the maps. So there's 4 elements that I've heard that are captured as part of this body of work ahead of Christmas. And we may not be able to achieve all of them, but we need to achieve something, because we have had the discussion time and again around this one.
Well, the sad thing about it is when I was chairing Enterprise Hokitika, I was having the same discussions with council back then, and that was like 7 years ago. So I would certainly hope that, we can get, this is why these guys come along and take the time to give the presentations and do all this work in the background, that we need to get some momentum going and ensure we can start supporting them and ticking those off the list.
Does that sound feasible?
Yeah.
Yep, great. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Please, thank you.
Through the chair, just comment. I think the name Destination Hokitika, by the way, rests really comfortably with that kaupapa, as opposed to Destination Westland, which just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. It's a company that has a collection of an airport, which is obviously a destination, and a property company with pension flats and in the Hokitika Museum. I think that is, as part of the review of the CCOs, I think that would be definitely should be in the equation.
What do you?
It's through the chair that obviously that entity was set up with aspirations. So
Very lofty
within the early days.
Mandated aspirations, one might say. Right, okay, thank you very much. The agenda formally is nearing a close. Can we have someone please to move that we receive Samuel Blight's presentation as Chair of Destination Hokitika?